Three things could silence an entire prison block: a riot, a stabbing, or her. The morning Amara Osei walked into Gyeongsan Maximum Security Prison, she was 27 minutes late, had coffee on her blouse, and had already been told by 4 different people that she was going to get herself killed. She told all 4 of them the same thing. "Thank you for your concern. Goodbye." She was not afraid of this prison. She was not afraid of the 40-foot concrete walls topped with razor wire that glinted like teeth in the grey morning light. She was not afraid of the iron gates that screamed when they opened, or the guards who looked at her new staff badge like it was written in a language they didn't speak, or the sign above the main entrance that someone had helpfully vandalized to read, "Gyeongsan Correctional Facility, Abandon Hope, all YE who enter." She had a job to do. She had reasons to do it. Reasons she was not prepared to discuss with anyone. Ms. Osei. The intake guard, a round-faced young man named Officer BAE, blinked at her clipboard. "Your appointment was at 8.
Thank you.
It still is 8, Amara said pleasantly. "By my watch. It's 8:27. Then your watch is wrong." She held out her hand. "Badge and clearance, please." Officer BA gave her the badge. He also gave her a look that said, "You are either very brave or very stupid, and I cannot tell which yet." Amara pinned the badge to her blouse, over the coffee stain, which she was pretending didn't exist, and followed him into the facility. The first thing she noticed was the noise. Not loud, controlled, institutional, the noise of 800 men organized into a system designed to contain them. Footsteps. Metal. Distant shouting. The particular kind of silence that existed inside louder sounds. The second thing she noticed was how the noise changed when she walked into the recreation yard. It went quiet. Not all of it. Not the televisions, not the distant clatter of the kitchen, not the guards at the perimeter talking into their radios. But the men in the yard, the ones who'd been talking, pacing, playing cards, arguing in 3 languages, they went quiet the way water goes quiet right before something big moves through it. Amara kept walking. She had been warned about Block D. She had been warned about Block D specifically by her supervisor, by HR, by the prison chaplain who had pulled her aside with the energy of a man delivering last rites, and by the previous welfare officer assigned to this block who had requested a transfer to a different country. Not a different prison. A different country. Block D housed the longest-serving, highest-risk inmates in Gyeongsan. It also, as of 2 years ago, housed one Kang Seo-jin, former head of the Gyeongsan Syndicate, convicted on counts she'd lost track of trying to memorize, and widely acknowledged to be the most dangerous man currently breathing in the Korean peninsula. "The thing about Kang Seo-jin," Officer BA said quietly as they crossed the yard, "is that he doesn't do anything. No fights. No incidents. No violations." He paused. "That's what's terrifying. He doesn't have to." Amara was listening. She was also looking. She found him immediately, not because he was the largest man in the yard, because he wasn't. Not because he was the loudest, because he was the opposite of loud. She found him because every single person in that yard was arranged, unconsciously, around him. Like planets orbiting a sun that had never asked to be the center of anything. He stood at the far end of the yard near the weight structure, arms crossed, saying nothing to no one. Black prison uniform. The dragon tattoo that started below his jaw and disappeared beneath his collar. A face that belonged on a sculpture, all clean lines and severity, currently wearing an expression that said he found the entire world mildly contemptible. He was looking at her. Not the way the other inmates were looking at her, curious, interested, assessing. He was looking at her the way a chess player looks at a move they didn't see coming. Still. Precise. Like he was already 3 steps ahead and was simply waiting to find out if he was right. Amara looked back. Officer BA actually grabbed her elbow. "Don't. Don't what? Don't look at him. He's looking at me. That's different. You can't just be sputtered." Nobody looks back at Kang Seo-jin. "How unfortunate for him," Amara said. "A man who never gets looked at properly." She turned back toward the administration building. "Which room are my sessions in?" Officer BA stared at her profile like she had just announced she would be swimming with crocodiles for fun. "Room 7, he said faintly. "God help you." "He usually does." She smiled. "Eventually." Room 7 was smaller than she'd expected. 1 table. 2 chairs bolted to the floor. A camera in the corner with a small red light that blinked, blinked like a nervous eye. The walls were that particular shade of institutional green that existed nowhere in nature and had been specifically designed, Amara suspected, to make everyone inside feel slightly ill. She arranged her files, uncapped her pen, straightened her notepad. She was completely, absolutely ready. The door opened. 2 guards brought him in. Protocol for Block D inmates. Full escort, wrists in restraints, door secured behind them. Seojin walked between them the way a man walks between 2 lampposts, paying them precisely 0 attention. The restraints might as well have been a fashion choice. He looked at the room. He looked at her files. He looked at her. He sat down. He said nothing. Amara waited 3 full seconds, which she had read in a psychology text was enough time to establish conversational authority without appearing aggressive. Seojin waited 3 full seconds, then 4, then 10, apparently having also read that same psychology text and decided to use it against her. Amara put her pen to paper. "Good morning, Mr. Kang. My name is Amara Osei. I'm your new welfare officer. I'll be meeting with you weekly to assess your... You're late." She paused. "I'm sorry. Your appointment was at 8. His Korean was low and even and carried the particular smoothness of a man who had never needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. "It's 8:34. Amara stared at him. He stared back. "My watch," she said carefully, "was wrong." "Your watch," he said, "has been wrong since you entered the facility. I could see it from the yard." She blinked. "You could see my watch from 50 meters away. I could see you were rushing. People who are on time don't rush." He tilted his head, just slightly, just enough. "You also have coffee on your shirt." Amara looked down. Looked up. "Those are my credentials," she said with great dignity. "I work very hard." Something shifted in his face. Not a smile. Kang Seojin did not smile. But the very edges of his expression did something unauthorized, just for a half-second, before his face locked back into its usual configuration of beautiful indifference. "Your credentials," he repeated. "Yes." She clicked her pen. "Now, I'd like to start by asking about your sleeping pattern." "No. I'm sorry. I don't discuss my sleeping pattern with strangers." "I'm not a stranger. I'm your welfare officer. You've been in this room for 4 minutes. You're a stranger." Amara wrote difficult at the top of her notepad, then thought better of it and wrote initial resistance, expected instead, because this was a professional document and she was a professional, and also because she had a feeling he could read upside down. "Fine," she said pleasantly. "Tell me about your week." "No." "Your meals." "No." "Your relationship with the other inmates." "No." "Mr. Kang." She set down her pen, folded her hands, looked at him the way she had practiced in the mirror, the look that said, "I have infinite patience and absolutely nothing else to do today. I am required by law to conduct these welfare sessions. You are required by law to participate in them. We can do this easily, or we can do this for a very long time. Either way, we are doing it." He regarded her for a long moment. "You're not afraid of me," he said. Not a question. An observation. Like he was filing it somewhere. "Should I be?" she said. 3 welfare officers have sat in that chair before you." He glanced at the bolted chair she occupied. 1 resigned the same day. 1 requested an emergency transfer. 1, a pause, cried. "That must have been very uncomfortable for you," Amara said. "Being cried at." He blinked. Just slightly. "It was." "Well." She picked up her pen again. "I have no intention of crying. And I'm certainly not resigning." She tilted her head, mirroring his own gesture from moments ago, and watched his eyes track it. "So, you're weak. In your own time." A long silence. The red light on the camera blinked. 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 "Loud," he said finally. She waited. "The block is loud at night. The man 3 cells over snores like a dying engine. I've considered solutions. Legal solutions, I'd hope. Mostly." She wrote, "Sleep disrupted. Environmental causes. I can submit a request for a cell reassignment for the inmate." "Don't." He said it quickly. Then, his mind to deal with. Amara very carefully did not ask what that meant. Noted. Have you spoken to anyone about the disruption? I'm speaking to you. Have you spoken to anyone before today? No. Why not? He looked at her like this was the most unnecessary question he'd encountered since incarceration. Because I don't speak to people. You're speaking to me. You're not giving me a choice. You have a choice, she said. You're choosing to speak to me. Those are different things. She held his gaze. Why? He was quiet for a moment, studying her face with that chess player tension. Because, he said finally, you're interesting. Amara wrote, making progress. And underneath it, so small it couldn't be read even right side up, do not make it weird, Amara. Likewise, Mr. Kang, she said. Likewise. The session ended at 9:15. The guards came. Seojin stood. He moved to the door, stopped. Next week, he said, not turning around. Be on time. My watch, Amara said, will be calibrated. Good. He left. Amara sat in the empty room for 1 full minute, staring at the wall, before writing at the bottom of her notepad in large letters. Absolutely do not make it weird. She underlined it twice. The second session was the following Tuesday. Amara arrived at 7:59 and 45 seconds. She had set 3 alarms, taken the early bus, and speedwalked the last 2 blocks in heels that were not made for speedwalking. Also, she could sit in room 7 with her files neatly arranged and her pen already uncapped when the door opened at exactly 8 o'clock. Seojin walked in, sat down, and looked at her. You're early, he said. My watch is calibrated. It's 45 seconds early. Those are 45 seconds I'm gifting to you. He looked at her like she was a crossword puzzle in a language he hadn't studied yet. Nobody gives me things. How tragic. She clicked her pen. You're weak. Go. Something happened in his face. Not a smile. Adjacent to a smile. A first cousin of a smile, visiting briefly before anyone could catch it. The man with the snoring, he said. Yes. He's been moved. Amara looked up. I didn't file that request. No. He said nothing more. Amara decided not to pursue it, partly because she was a professional, partly because the answer was almost certainly something she didn't want on her notepad. And your sleep. Better. Good. She wrote it down. Have you been eating regularly? Yes. Exercising? Yes. Any conflicts with other inmates or staff? A pause. Define conflict. Mr. Kang. No. She looked at him over her notepad. He looked back at her. His face was doing that specific nothing that she was starting to understand was actually everything. The way a blank wall is only blank until you look at it long enough and realize it's covered in something. Can I ask you something personal? She said. His eyes narrowed very slightly. You can ask. What do you do all day? He stared. What? Your schedule. Meals, yard time, work duty. What do you actually do with the hours? What goes on in your head? She leaned forward slightly. People assume that men like you. She stopped. Men in your situation. People assume the hours are just suffered. I want to know if that's true. A very long silence. I read, he said finally. It came out like a confession. What do you read? Philosophy, mostly. He said this the way someone says I've developed an embarrassing habit. Which philosophers? Camus. Some Nietzsche. A beat. I find Nietzsche insufferable. Amara stared at him. Kang Seojin, former head of the most feared criminal syndicate in Korea, sitting in his cell every night reading Camus and complaining about Nietzsche. Camus makes sense. He said it defensively, which was extraordinary on a face built for sovereignty. Sisyphus rolling his rock, finding meaning in a meaningless task. His eyes moved away, just briefly, just enough. That part one understand. She felt something in her chest shift. She wrote, intelligent, self-aware, hiding it, and below that, very small, stop being charmed. You are a professional. We'll continue next week, she said. He stood, moved to the door. The man 3 cells over, he said without turning. He requested the move himself. I didn't threaten him. A pause. Much. The door closed. Amara put her pen down and looked at the ceiling for a long time. By the sixth session, she knew his coffee preference. Black, no sugar, like bitterness was a personal philosophy. By the eighth, she'd learned he had memorized the entire prison schedule and could tell her where any guard was at any given time without looking. Not because he was planning anything. Just because the alternative was not knowing, and he found not knowing intolerable. By the 10th, she had learned that he had people on the outside who sent him updates through a system she was careful not to investigate, and that those updates were getting worse. His empire, built over 15 years, built from nothing, built with methods she had deliberately not researched, was being taken apart brick by a man named Director Choi who had been his second in command and was now his successor by theft. She learned this not from files. She learned this from watching his face over 10 weeks of sessions, the way the muscles in his jaw tightened on certain days, the way his stillness became a different kind of stillness, the way he sometimes sat down and it was only his body in the chair and the rest of him was somewhere far away, doing calculations she wasn't privy to. She was not supposed to care about this. She cared about this. She was also not supposed to notice that he had started watching the door for her, that in the 3 sessions where she'd been even fractionally late due to factors beyond her control, the bus, the rain, one deeply unfortunate incident involving a revolving door, he had been already sitting in room 7 before the guards brought him down, which meant he had been ready and waiting, which meant she was not supposed to think about what that meant. She thought about it constantly. Week 11. She came in to find him already seated, which was not unusual anymore. What was unusual was what was on the table. Her coffee. Black, because everyone in the facility took it with milk and sugar out of the shared urn, and he had somehow, inexplicably, gotten the kitchen to produce a separate cup of black coffee with a small piece of paper tucked under the saucer that read, in his handwriting, which was sharp and deliberate and took up exactly as much space as it needed. You work too hard. Amara stared at it. She looked at him. He was looking at the wall. Where did you get this? She said. The kitchen. The kitchen doesn't do separate orders. They do now. Did you threaten the kitchen staff? A pause. Define threat. Kang Seo-jin. I made a persuasive argument. They were persuaded. She looked at the coffee. She looked at him. She sat down, wrapped both hands around the cup, and said, with great professionalism, "This is inappropriate." "You're tired," he said, looking at her now. Direct. "You have been for 3 weeks. You come in with your eyes not all the way open. You leave with your pen uncapped." His gaze moved across her face, careful, detailed, noting. "You take care of everyone in here. Nobody takes care of you." Amara opened her mouth. Closed it. "That is," she said finally, "a very perceptive and completely inappropriate observation." Noted. "This cannot happen again." Understood. She drank the coffee. It was perfect. He watched her drink it and said nothing, but his face did that unauthorized thing again, that almost smile, that brief, helpless crack in the wall, and this time it lasted a full second before he put it away. Amara wrote nothing in her notepad for the first 3 minutes of the session, which was a new personal record. It was week 13 when she saw the scar. His sleeve rode up during a session, just slightly, just enough, and she saw it, a long, puckered line running from his wrist almost to his elbow. Old. Years old, from the look of it. "What happened?" she asked. He pulled his sleeve down. "Nothing." "That's not nothing. It was a long time ago." Seo-jin. She used his name without thinking. First time. They both heard it happen. Something moved in his face, something quick and startled, like a man who had not expected to hear his name said that way. Quiet. Human. Like it was just a name and not a title. He was quiet for a long time. "I was 19, he said finally. "Starting the syndicate. I made an error in judgment." His jaw worked. Someone corrected it. "They did that to you." "I did worse to them afterward." He said it flatly, no performance in it, not bragging, not ashamed. Just true. "I see. Does that frighten you?" She looked at the scar. Looked at his face. "No," she said. And then, because she was constitutionally unable to stop herself, "Does it matter if it does?" He stared at her. "I mean," she continued, You've been asking me that question in various forms for 13 weeks. Whether I'm afraid of you. As if it would change something. As if my being afraid would make you feel better or worse or different somehow. She tilted her head. Which is it? Do you want me to be afraid of you, or do you want me not to be? The silence that followed was the longest of all the silences, and they had built a small library of silences by now. I don't know, he said finally. Low and honest and disconcerted in a way she suspected no one ever made him feel. That's the most interesting thing you've said in 13 weeks, she told him. I've said very interesting things for 13 weeks. You've said guarded things. That's different. She closed her notebook. For the record, I'm not afraid of you. I'm not sure that's wise. But it's true. He held her gaze. Why not? Because, she said, I've sat across from you for 13 weeks and you have never once tried to make me afraid. Intimidated? Occasionally. Exasperated? Regularly. Afraid? She shook her head. Whatever you are out there, you're different in here. I'm exactly the same. You're not. She stood, gathering her files. The man your record describes would not have gotten the kitchen to make black coffee because a welfare officer looked tired. She tucked her notepad under her arm. See you next week, Seo-jin. She said his name again. Deliberately this time. He didn't answer. But she was at the door before she heard his voice. Low, almost reluctant, like the words were leaving without his permission. Amara. She stopped. Turned. He was looking at the table, not at her. Be careful, he said. On your way home. The south exit bus stop. There's been incidents there at night. Take the north route. She stared at the back of his head. How do you know how I get home? A pause. I know a lot of things. That is deeply alarming. Yes. Another pause. Take the north route anyway. She took the north route. She stood at the bus stop in the evening grey and thought about a man in a prison cell, with no window and no freedom and an empire falling apart around him, who had somehow found out which bus she took home and at which stop. She thought, this is going to be a problem. She thought, I'm already in trouble. She thought, he knew, didn't he? He knew it was me from the moment I walked into that yard. The bus came. She got on. She pressed her hand over her chest where her heart was doing something alarming and entirely unprofessional. Outside the window, Gyeongsan Prison shrank in the distance, 40-foot walls, and razor wire, and somewhere inside it, a man who read Camus and hated Nietzsche and made sure her coffee was black. Oh no, Amara said quietly to her reflection in the window. Her reflection looked back, and did not disagree. He didn't ask her with words. He slid a folded piece of paper across the table. And she didn't say no. That was the moment everything became irreversible. Week 14 started with a body. Not a dead one. Amara was clear on that point when Officer Beer came running to find her at 7:58 in the morning, slightly breathless, tie crooked, carrying the energy of a man who had already had the worst morning of his career, and it wasn't even 8 o'clock yet. Inmate in Block C, he said. Broken wrist, 2 cracked ribs, dislocated shoulder. Amara looked up from her files. Who? Officer Nam's informant. The one who's been. Beer lowered his voice, glanced left and right like a man in a spy film, watching Block D. Amara set down her pen very carefully. Watching Block D. Someone got to him in the night. Guards found him at shift change. B.A. leaned in. He's not saying who did it. Won't even open his mouth. Just keeps shaking his head. Another glance around the corridor. Mizo say, nobody in Block C would touch that man. He had protection. The only person with enough reach to. Thank you, Officer BAE, Amara said pleasantly. I'll note it in my report. You're not. You don't want to know who. I have a session at 8. She capped her pen, collected her files, stood up. Have a good morning. She walked down the corridor at a measured professional pace. She did not run. She very much wanted to run. He was already in room 7 when she arrived. Which was becoming a habit. Which she was becoming used to. Which was itself a problem she was not fully prepared to address. She put her files on the table. She sat down. She folded her hands. She looked at Kang Seo-jin, who was looking at the wall with the serene expression of a man who had not orchestrated anything at all and was having a perfectly unremarkable morning. There was an incident in Block C, she said. An inmate with a broken wrist. Accidents happen. 2 cracked ribs. Terrible things, accidents. Dislocated shoulder. Clumsy people everywhere these days. Seo-jin. He turned to look at her. Calm. Steady. The face of a man who had never in his life been clumsy about anything. He was watching you, he said simply. I dealt with it. I need you to define dealt with. He'll recover. A pause. The smallest pause. Mostly. She pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose. You cannot keep. This is a correctional facility, not your empire, he offered. I was going to say territory. It's both, he said, with a complete absence of apology. And he was watching you, not me. That's a different matter. She looked at him. He looked back at her with perfect equanimity, like a man who had just said something completely ordinary and couldn't understand why she was making a face. If you broke a man's wrist because he was watching me. And his ribs. And his ribs. And his shoulder. You keep leaving that out. Seojin. Amara. He said her name with exactly the infuriating calm he used for everything. He was reporting your schedule to Director Choiseman inside this facility. Your movements. Your routine. A beat. The smallest crack in the calm. Just a fracture, barely visible, gone before she could measure it. What do you think was going to happen with that information? She went very still. He held her gaze. I dealt with it, he said again, quieter now. Final. The way mountains are final. Amara looked at her hands. Looked at him. Opened her notebook, wrote nothing in it, closed it again. Next time, she said. Tell me first. He blinked. Just once. Like he hadn't expected that response at all. Tell you. Yes. Before anyone's shoulder gets dislocated. She picked up her pen. We need a system. A system. For communication. That doesn't involve bones. She raised an eyebrow. You can do that? Communicate without breaking something. He stared at her for a very long moment. And then, for the first time, the absolute first time in 14 weeks, Kang Seo-jin smiled. Not the almost smile. Not the half-cousin of a smile. A real one. Unexpected and slightly devastating, like a crack of sun through a cloud that had no business moving. It lasted approximately 1.5 seconds. Then it was gone, packed away, and he was looking at the table again like nothing had happened. Amara looked at her notepad. She had written a looping spiral in the margin without noticing. Stop it, she told herself firmly. She did not stop it. The note came on a Tuesday. Week 15. Ordinary morning, grey sky, cold corridor, Officer BAE at the gate with his clipboard and his expression of perpetual low-level anxiety. Amara had her coffee. Her files. Her pen. She walked into room 7. Seo-jin was already there. He sat across from her as always, arms resting on the table, face doing its customary impression of a man who had not already planned 17 things today and would plan 17 more before lunch. He looked at her when she sat down. He looked at her files. He looked at the camera in the corner. Then he slid his hand across the table and left something on her side of it. A folded piece of paper. Small. Tight. Like it had been creased and recreased many times. Like he'd been holding it for a while before deciding. He pulled his hand back. He said absolutely nothing. Amara looked at the paper. She looked at him. He was studying the wall with the intense focus of a man fascinated by beige paint. She looked at the camera that was pointed 3 degrees too far left, which she had noticed on week 3 and had not reported, which if she was being honest with herself was itself already a choice, already a line she had already crossed without fully looking down to see it. She put her hand over the paper, slid it off the table and into her lap in one smooth motion. She opened her notepad, clicked her pen. You're weak, she said. Quiet, he said. Sleep. Improved. Appetite. Fine. Any issues with other inmates or staff? None. A pause. This week. She wrote nothing. She looked at her notepad. She looked at him. He was looking at her now, direct, steady, with those dark eyes that had been reading her like a text in a language he'd already mastered, and something in them right now was different. Not cool. Not calculating. Something bad. Something that was almost, please. Thank you, Mr. Kang, she said. I'll see you next week. She read it in the single-stall bathroom at the end of the east corridor with the door locked and the tap running. His handwriting was exactly as she'd expected. Sharp. Deliberate. Minimal. A man who chose every word because wasting them offended him on principle. Director Choi moves against my remaining people at the end of next month. 3 men who are loyal to me, genuinely loyal, the kind you can't replace, will be dead before the month after that. I need to get out. I have a plan. It requires access that only you have, supply corridor, east wing, transit authorization. I'm not going to tell you details until you agree, because knowing details without agreeing makes you an accessory, and I won't do that to you. I know what I'm asking. I know what it costs you. I've known since week 3 that you were the only person in this facility I would ever trust with this, and I have spent 12 weeks trying to find another way because I don't want to put this on you. There isn't another way. If you say no, I will walk out of that room next week and we will not speak of this again, and I will make sure you are never touched. You have my word. If you say yes, I will not forget it. Not ever. For the rest of my life, whatever that looks like, I will not forget it. Tell me no. I mean that. Tell me no if that's your answer. Don't do this for obligation. S. Amara read it twice. She folded it back up. She turned off the tap. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. Her eyes, her locks pulled back, the small scar below her left ear that had been there for 2 years, the ghost of a burning car and a man who had never stayed to take credit for pulling her out of it. Amara Josephine Osei, she said to her reflection. Her reflection looked back. You are a certified welfare officer with a clean record, a good reputation, and a mother who specifically said don't do anything that ends up on the news. Her reflection did not argue. You are not going to help a convicted crime lord escape from a maximum security prison. Still no argument. You are a professional. Silence. He said don't do it for obligation, she told her reflection. Her reflection raised an eyebrow. I'm not. She straightened her blouse. That's the problem. She unlocked the door. Walked back to her office. Sat down. She pulled out a fresh piece of paper, wrote 2 words, folded it to exactly the same size as his, and put it in her cardigan pocket. It said, Tell me everything. Week 16. She arrived at 7:59. She sat down. She arranged her files. She did not look at the camera. She put her hand flat on the table. She slid the paper across. Seojin's eyes dropped to it. Came back up to her face. In all 15 weeks, in all the sessions and silences and careful conversations, she had never seen him look at her the way he looked at her in that moment, like something in him that had been wound very, very tight had just, quietly, loosened 1 degree. He put his hand over the paper without looking down. He held her gaze. You understand what this means, he said. Low and serious, every trace of the wall down for this one moment. I understand. Your job. Your record. If it goes wrong. I said I understand, Seojin. I'm a welfare officer. I work with people every day who are making the most consequential decisions of their lives. She tilted her head. I know what a real decision looks like. This isn't. He stopped. I didn't write that note so you'd feel obligated. I know. Because you think you owe me something. I know. Because of what happened on the bridge. She went very still. He stopped. The word bridge sat between them on the table like a third person in the room. Amara looked at Kang Seojin, who was looking back at her with an expression that had run completely out of places to hide. I wondered, she said quietly, when you'd say it. He said nothing. I knew from week 2, she continued. You looked at my scar the first time in week 3. You have been. The way you've been watching me is not how you watch a stranger. She held his gaze. It was you. A long, long silence. Yes, he said. Just that. Just the one word, flat and honest and carrying the weight of 2 years. She breathed. Why did you not say anything? What would I have said? Not a question. A statement. The words of a man who had turned this over many times and found no satisfactory answer. What would I have said, Amara? From in here. From this chair. She looked at his hands on the table. Her notes still under his palm. You could have said it was me. And then what? His jaw worked. And then you felt obligated to visit. To be kind to me. He stopped. Started again, quieter. I didn't want that. What did you want? He looked at her. For one unguarded moment, Kang Seo-jin, ruthless, calculating, feared by men who feared nothing, looked at her like a man who knew exactly what he wanted and had spent a long time trying to convince himself he couldn't have it. This, he said. Whatever this is. I wanted this to be real. Amara's heart did something it had been threatening to do for weeks. She looked at the table. She looked at him. It's real, she said. Simple and certain as anything she'd ever said. Now. She clicked her pen. Professional face back, mostly, except for the thing happening around her eyes that she couldn't fully control. Tell me the plan. Every detail. Don't leave anything out. He looked at her for one more moment, like a man memorizing something before the light changes. Then he started talking. He talked for 40 minutes across 3 sessions that she scheduled back-to-back under the guise of an extended welfare assessment. Legitimate, documented, unremarkable on paper. The plan was this. Every 3 months, the prison processed a supply transfer through the East Wing loading dock. Medical supplies, administrative equipment, transferring between facilities. The transit van was unmarked and logged under a general facilities code. Not prisoner movement, not flagged for the high-security tracking system. A gap in the infrastructure, deliberately narrow, left over from a system update 4 years ago that nobody had gotten around to patching because bureaucracy moved the way bureaucracy moved. Seo-jin had been watching this gap for 18 months. What he needed, transit authorization in the supply log, signed by a welfare officer, specifically, one with East Wing clearance. Access to the service corridor between the welfare suite and the loading dock, which was unmonitored for the 11 minutes between the 2 o'clock guard rotation. A maintenance uniform left in a specific supply closet. And a signal, something small, something unremarkable, to tell him the dock was clear. What he had on the outside, a contact named Ryu who would be driving the transit van. A boat in Busan. And Director Choi's complete financial records, backed up in 3 locations, encrypted, ready to be handed to prosecutors the moment he was clear of the country. You've had the financial records this whole time. Amara said in the 3rd session. Yes. You could have ended Choi without leaving. The records alone won't hold. Choi has 3 judges. He said it flatly, not bragging, just accounting. I need to be free to operate. To contact sources. To apply the kind of pressure that doesn't go through courts. His eyes moved over her face. This isn't just about running, Amara. This is about finishing it. She was quiet for a moment. And after Choi is gone, most of the charges against me fall apart. The syndicate prosecutions were built on testimony he manufactured. With the financial records and the right people. A pause. It's not certain. But it's possible. Possible, she repeated. More than I had 3 months ago. He looked at her steadily. Before you. She wrote something in her notepad. Possibly words. Possibly just the same spiral she always drew when she was pretending not to feel things. Timeline. Supply transfer is in 4 weeks. We move then or we wait 3 months. We can't wait 3 months. No. She clicked her pen. Clicked it again. The signal. What do you want me to use? He almost smiled. I'll know when you're in the corridor. I don't need a signal. She looked up. You'll know. I pay attention. To what? You're in a cell. I pay attention to everything. He said it simply. I have been paying attention to you for 15 weeks. I know your footsteps. I know the sound your keycard makes in the East Wing reader. I know. He stopped. Seemed to realize he was saying a great deal. Looked at the table. I'll know. Amara stared at him. He studied the wall. Kang Seo-jin, she said slowly. Do you know my footsteps? That's not. You can identify me by the sound of my feet on the corridor floor. It's a skill. That is the single most alarming and, she stopped. Reordered herself. Alarming thing anyone has ever said to me. You said and. I'm leaving the second word out. You were going to say flattering. I absolutely was not. You were. I am a professional. You were going to say flattering, he said, with a composure so complete it was offensive. Amara wrote in her notepad with perhaps more force than required. He watched her with the expression of a man who had won something small and was not going to be mature about it. 3 weeks before the break, everything changed. Not the plan held. Ryu confirmed the van. The supply log had been adjusted, quietly, carefully, in a way that would survive a routine audit. The maintenance uniform was sitting in supply closet 4C, under a shelf of cleaning equipment. What changed was a Tuesday afternoon in week 18, when Amara arrived at room 7 to find Seojin already seated and the look on his face completely wrong. Not dangerous. Not cold. Something worse. Controlled worry. The look of a man managing a situation that was not manageable and doing it with his whole chest. She sat down. Didn't speak. Waited. Choi moved the timeline, he said. What? My contact on the outside. He moved the elimination order up. My men have 2 weeks, not 4. He held her gaze. Even, steady, the way he held everything, even when it was costing him. We have to move with the next supply window. 10 days. 10 days. Amara's brain did the calculation before the rest of her caught up. 10 days meant the documentation needed to be in by Friday. The corridor schedule needed to shift. Ryu needed to reroute. That's, Seojin, that's not enough time to. I know. The supply log adjustment needs authorization from 2 departments. I can only access one, the other one is. Officer Kwon. East Administration. He paused. He takes his lunch in the East break room alone every day between 1 and 1:15. His access card is on his left hip. Amara stared. You want me to pickpocket a prison administrator? I want you to borrow his access card for 8 minutes. In what universe is that? It's the only way. Kang Seojin, I am a welfare officer. I got into this profession because I like helping people. I do not have a pickpocketing module in my training. How hard did you look? Very hard. He almost smiled. This was somehow the worst possible moment for him to almost smile, and yet here it was, the corner of his mouth doing the thing, his eyes doing the thing, everything about him doing the thing. I'll walk you through it, he said. You'll walk me through pickpocketing. It's not complicated. Card is on his left hip. His right hand. If you approach from his right side with a file in your hand, his attention goes to the file, not the left hip. He demonstrated with his own hand, a smooth, practiced, deeply concerning movement. 4 seconds. You'll have it before he finishes his first sentence. How do you know how to do that? I started my career at 14. There's so much to unpack in that statement. 8 minutes, he said. Then you put it back the same way, approach from the right, he never knows. Amara pressed both palms to the table. She looked at the ceiling. She looked at him. He looked back at her, calm, certain, the way he always was, but underneath it something that was asking. Something that had been asking for weeks, quietly, under everything else, the way a current runs under still water. Trust me. She breathed. If I get caught, she said. You won't. If I do. You won't. I don't let things go wrong when it matters. His voice dropped, low and certain and absolute. I won't let anything happen to you. I need you to believe that. She looked at him for a long time. She thought about the bridge, the burning car, the door ripped clean off. She thought about 15 weeks of black coffee, philosophy debates, the scar on his arm, the sound of his rare laugh, the way he said her name like it was something he'd been saving. She thought about the fact that this man, this criminal, this force of nature in a grey uniform, had spent 12 weeks trying to find another way before he asked her. She thought about the way he'd said I wanted this to be real. Walk me through the card, she said. Something in his face went quiet and certain and warm, all at once. The face of a man who did not show relief often because he was rarely uncertain enough to need it. Approach from the right, he said. File in hand. You start talking before he can. About what? Doesn't matter. You could talk about anything. Even Nietzsche. God, not Nietzsche. You brought up Nietzsche. I said I found him insufferable. I didn't say I wanted to discuss him. So you can't handle Nietzsche. I can handle Nietzsche perfectly well. I simply find suffering voluntarily while reading when you could be doing literally anything else. He literally wrote a book called Thus Spoke Zarathustra. If that title alone doesn't put you off, I don't know what to tell you. Thus spoke, he stopped. Stared at her. Did you just make a joke? I make jokes constantly. You never notice because your face is busy being disapproving. My face is not. He stopped again. Realigned. Looked away. Looked back. You've read Nietzsche. I read everything. She shrugged. Camus is better. You're right about that. The look he gave her then was completely new. Like she'd added a room to a house he thought he'd fully mapped. Tell me something, he said. We are supposed to be planning a prison break. Tell me something about yourself. Something not in your file. She paused. Tilted her head. My grandmother taught me to make jollof rice at 5 years old. She said no man was worth keeping who couldn't appreciate jollof rice, and she died at 93 having been right about most things. He was quiet for a moment. When I get out, he said carefully, will you make it for me? Amara blinked. It was such a small thing to say. Such a simple, human, domestic, impossible thing. From this man in this room under this particular fluorescent light with his restraints and his empire and his dragon tattoo. She felt it everywhere. If you get yourself out in one piece, she said, steadying her voice, I will make you the best jollof rice of your life. He looked at her steadily. Then I'm definitely not getting caught. Good. She picked up her pen. Now, one more time from the top. Walk me through everything. And he did. 6 days before the break, Amara borrowed Officer Kwan's access card on a Thursday. She approached from the right. She had a file in her hand. She started talking about a welfare assessment rescheduling before Kwan put down his chopsticks. She had the card in 8 seconds. She had the authorization filed in 6 minutes. She had the card back on his hip before he finished his lunch. She walked back to her office with steady legs and a heart rate that she was confident would return to normal sometime in the next decade. She sat down at her desk. She pressed both hands flat on the surface. Your grandmother, she said quietly to no one, did not raise a criminal. She raised a woman who makes good decisions. She paused. This is a very good decision. Another pause. I think. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Haven't heard from you in a week. Are you okay? You look stressed in your profile picture. Are you eating? Amara put her phone face down on the desk. I'm fine, Mama, she whispered. Everything is fine. Somewhere on the other side of the facility, in a cell that was 4 meters by 3, she knew without knowing how she knew that Kang Seojin was awake. Counting down. Planning. She was almost certainly sure he was also, in his contained and infuriating way, thinking about her. She was completely, definitely sure she was thinking about him. 6 days, she said to her empty office. The night before the break, she couldn't sleep. She lay in her apartment and stared at the ceiling and ran the plan through her head 17 times and found nothing wrong with it, which should have been comforting and wasn't, because some part of her understood that the thing keeping her awake had nothing to do with logistics. She got up. Made tea she didn't drink. Stood at her window and watched the city do what cities do at 2 in the morning. Breathed quietly, lights blinking, distant traffic, the whole ordinary machinery of life turning over. She thought about who she was going to be tomorrow. She had spent her entire career defined by one principle. Show up for people nobody else bothers with. The ones the system has already written off. Sit across from them in bad rooms under bad lighting and insist on seeing them as people. Whole, complicated, worth the hour. She had done that. She had done it so thoroughly that she had ended up in this place, standing at a window at 2 in the morning, 12 hours from helping a convicted crime lord escape prison, in love with him, clear-eyed about it, afraid and certain in equal measure. Her phone lit up on the counter. A text from an unknown number, one she'd never seen, that would be gone by morning, that had clearly been routed through several other things before reaching her. It said, "You should be sleeping." She stared at it. She typed back, "How are you texting me?" 3 dots. Then, "I told you. I know things. You're supposed to be locked in a cell. I am. The cell doesn't lock my mind. She sat down on her couch, pulled her knees up, looked at her phone. Are you afraid? She typed. A pause. Longer than his usual pauses. Then. Yes. Not of tomorrow. Of after. She held her breath. What do you mean? I have been in control of everything since I was 19 years old. I built everything from the ground. I knew how every piece moved. A pause. You are the first thing I have ever encountered that I cannot plan around. I don't know what comes next with you and I can't calculate it, and I find that. Another pause. Terrifying. And necessary. Amara read that 3 times. Then she typed, Kang Seo-jin, are you telling me I terrify you? Yes. The man who runs a criminal empire. Ran. You're terrified of me. I'm terrified of wanting things I'm not entitled to want. She sat very still. She typed, who told you weren't entitled? No response for a long time. Then. Get some sleep, Amara. Tomorrow we need you sharp. You're deflecting. I'm always deflecting. Sleep. She almost laughed. She pressed her thumb to the screen like she could press through it. Good night, Seo-jin. Good night. Then, 30 seconds later, one more. Don't be late. She put the phone on her chest and looked at the ceiling and felt the laugh come out of her. Soft and real and full of something she had stopped pretending wasn't what it was. Don't be late, she repeated to her ceiling. She set 4 alarms. She slept. Tomorrow, the gate opens. Tomorrow, everything changes. Tomorrow, Amara Osei, welfare officer, rule follower, granddaughter of a woman who is right about most things, is going to do the most reckless, certain, irreversible thing of her life. And she is going to do it with her eyes wide open. She had planned for everything. The corridor. The timing. The van. The one thing she had not planned for was the way he looked at her the first time he saw her outside those walls. Like a man seeing color for the first time after years of gray. Like she was the reason he'd survived them. The morning of the break, Amara woke up at 5 a.m., sat straight up in bed, and said out loud to her empty apartment, I am not doing this. She sat with that for 30 seconds. Then she got up, ironed her uniform, fixed her hair, ate exactly half a piece of toast because her stomach had filed a formal complaint against the other half, and drove to Gyeongsan Maximum Security Prison. Because she was absolutely doing this. She was just going to complain about it the entire way. The facility was running on its usual Tuesday energy. Slow, institutional, the kind of morning where every guard moved like they were conserving fuel for an emergency that hadn't happened yet. Amara signed in at the gate. Smiled at Officer BAE. Accepted her badge with hands that were completely steady because she had spent the entire drive over practicing steady hands. You look pale, Officer BA said, peering at her. Fluorescent lighting, she said. It's everyone. You look specifically pale. Thank you, BAE. That's so helpful. Have a wonderful morning. She walked into the facility. She did not run. She wanted to run. She went to her office. She sat at her desk. She opened a file she wasn't reading and stared at the words on it until they stopped being words and became just shapes, while her brain ran the plan for the 19th time. East Wing Corridor. 2 p.m. Guard rotation gap. 11 minutes. Supply transit dock. Van arrives at 2:05. Seo-jin reaches the service exit at 2:08. They are in the van at 2:12. Ryu drives. She does not look back. 11 minutes. She had 11 minutes to blow up her entire career, commit multiple felonies, and escape the country with the most dangerous man in Korea. Simple, she whispered. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Gone after today. It said, breathe. She looked at it. Typed back, I am breathing. You're doing the shallow kind. The kind you do when you're catastrophizing. I'm not catastrophizing. I'm reviewing contingencies. Same thing. Breathe from your stomach, Amara. She stared at her phone. She, a grown woman with a master's degree, was receiving mindfulness coaching from an incarcerated crime lord through a contraband phone at 7:45 in the morning. You have a contraband phone, she typed. I have many things I'm not supposed to have. Breathe. I will report you. After 2 p.m. Report me all you want after 2 p.m. She almost smiled. Almost. Are you breathing? She typed. A pause. No. Kang Seo-jin. I'm working on it. She put the phone in her desk drawer. She breathed from her stomach. She looked at the clock. 7:47. 6 hours and 13 minutes. She opened a different file. This one she actually read. She was a professional. She was absolutely a professional. The morning went the way mornings went. Scheduled sessions, welfare checks, the ordinary machinery of a facility that had no idea today was different from any other Tuesday. She had 3 sessions before lunch, none of them Seo-jin, not on Tuesdays, everything deliberate, nothing that could create a pattern on the logs. She ate lunch at her desk. Half a sandwich. Her stomach accepted this grudgingly. At 1:15, she did a routine walk of the East Wing corridor. Welfare officers did this. It was in her remit. It was documented. It was completely, utterly unremarkable. She noted the supply closet, 4C, third shelf from the bottom, grey maintenance uniform, folded. Still there. She noted the camera angles. Still as she'd adjusted them, weeks ago, on a Tuesday when she dropped her lanyard near the wall mount and taken 4 seconds to fix it and 2 seconds to tilt the housing 3 degrees to the left. She noted the guard rotation, Officer Jong heading left at 1:58, Officer Han heading right, the gap opening like a window precisely on schedule. Everything was in place. She walked back to her office and sat down and looked at her hands. They were not shaking. She was mildly annoyed that they weren't, because shaking would have been honest. Instead they were just there. Calm. Like her body had decided without consulting her that they were past the point of hesitation. Maybe they were. At 1:55, Amara Osei picked up her welfare roster, tucked it under her arm, and walked to the East Wing corridor. She passed Officer BAE at the junction. Afternoon check, she said pleasantly. He said, scrolling his phone. She walked on. She reached the East Wing. She watched Officer Jong's back disappear around the left corner at 1:58. Exactly. Officer Han turned right at 1:59. Exactly. The corridor was empty. Amara stood in it alone. This corridor she had walked dozens of times, under these same lights, on this same floor, and felt the whole weight of the next 11 minutes pressed down on her at once. Then she moved. She was at supply closet 4C in 40 seconds. Opened it. Pulled the uniform from the third shelf. Left it hanging over the door at shoulder height, folded outward the way they'd agreed, visible from the service passage but not from the main corridor. Then she kept walking. To the end of the East Wing. To the door that led to the service corridor. She pushed it open. She stepped through. She was in the service corridor, narrow, grey, smelling of disinfectant and old metal, and she was alone. 4 seconds. Then she wasn't. He came from the left. She didn't hear him, not really, not footsteps, just a change in the air, the way pressure shifts before something moves through it. Then he was there, coming around the service bend in the grey maintenance uniform, his prison-issue clothes gone, the dragon tattoo just visible above the collar. He stopped when he saw her. She stopped when she saw him. They had spent 18 weeks in a room together, same table, same chairs, same bad lighting, same camera blinking in the corner. She knew his face better than she knew most things. But she had never seen him like this. Outside the chair. Moving freely. No guards at the door. No restraints. Just him. Full height, full presence. The whole uncontained reality of Kang Seo-jin with nothing between them except 6 feet of corridor and everything they hadn't said. He looked at her. She looked at him. You're early, he said. She blinked. I'm 30 seconds early. 30 seconds is early. 30 seconds is practically on time and you know it. The corner of his mouth. That corner. The one that kept doing unauthorized things. Your watch, he said, is perfectly calibrated. She lifted her chin. Let's go. They moved through the service corridor fast and quiet. Amara in front. She knew every corner, every door, every camera blind spot, because she had walked this route 40 times in the past 3 weeks under perfectly legitimate pretexts involving welfare documentation that didn't technically need to be delivered this way but that she'd invented justifications for anyway. Seo-jin behind her. 1 step back, exactly, not crowding, not flagging, matching her pace with the eerie precision of a man who had been practicing this in his head for months. Left at the junction, she murmured. I know. Don't touch the door handle on the grey door, the hinge squeaks. I know. Use your shoulder. Amara. What? I've been memorizing this corridor from your descriptions for 6 weeks. He said it very patiently, from just behind her left ear, his voice low enough that it didn't carry beyond the two of them. I have it. I'm just making sure. You've made sure 17 times. 18 is a good number. Amara. Closer now. Very low. I have you. Trust me. She stopped talking. She trusted him. She shouldn't. She absolutely should not. It was insane that she did. And yet here they were. They reached the grey door. She used her shoulder. It opened silently. Through it, the loading dock antechamber. One more door, then the dock itself, then the van. Amara checked her watch. 2:06. Right on schedule. She reached for the final door handle. From behind them, distant but escalating, a radio burst. Then a voice. East Wing, Welfare Sector, report. They both went still. The radio crackled again. All officers, routine head count, please confirm Block D is. Head count. Amara breathed. It's a routine head count, it's not. It's not about us, Seojin said quietly. Already calculating. She could hear it. Routine Tuesday count. They're not looking. We have 3 minutes before the variance triggers. You know their head count schedule. I've known it for 8 months. Is there anything in this prison you don't know? A beat. Where you keep your spare key, he said. I've been wondering. She turned to look at him in the low light of the antechamber. This absolutely insane moment, this corridor, this door, clocks counting down on multiple things simultaneously, and something in her face cracked open and she laughed. Short and real and slightly hysterical, quickly swallowed. His eyes softened. Just for a second. Just for her. Door, he said quietly. She turned back. Pushed it open. The loading dock. The van. Grey, unmarked, engine off. Ryu in the driver's seat, face forward, not turning around, exactly as planned. 2:08. Amara exhaled. Go, she said. They crossed the dock in 15 seconds. 14 steps. She counted them. Her heels on the concrete. She'd worn the flat ones today, the sensible ones, the ones that didn't announce her, and beside her, Seojin moving with that frightening economy of motion, no wasted movement, no hesitation. They were 10 feet from the van when the door behind them opened. Not the one they'd come through. The other one. The North Dock entrance. Officer Nam stepped through it. Amara's blood went ice cold. Nam, who had been watching her for weeks. Nam, who worked for Choi's man inside. Nam, who was supposed to be on the West Wing today because she had specifically, carefully checked the duty roster this morning and he was on the West Wing. Nam looked at them. Looked at the van. Looked at Seojin. His hand went to his radio. What happened next took approximately 4 seconds, and Amara witnessed all of it at a frame rate that felt much slower than real time. Seojin moved. Not toward Nam. He moved in front of Amara, 1 step, just one, placing himself between her and whatever was about to happen, and his hand came up, palm out, in a gesture so controlled it was almost conversational. Officer Nam, he said. Completely calm. Like they'd run into each other in a hallway. I'd put the radio down. Nam's hand stayed on it. His eyes were doing the calculation, the same calculation Amara was doing, and his math was probably coming out the same terrifying way hers was. You're going to step back, Seojin continued, in the same low, certain register he used for everything. You're going to turn around, and you're going to go back through that door. And we are never going to speak of this. I'll have you back in your cell in. No. Still calm. You won't. And here's why. He reached into the maintenance uniform pocket, slowly, deliberately, nothing hidden about it, and produced a folded piece of paper. These are the routing numbers for Director Choi's third offshore account. The one he doesn't know I know about. He set it on a nearby equipment crate. There are 11 more pages like this in the hands of 3 journalists and 2 prosecutors as of, he checked the dock clock on the wall, 40 minutes ago. Nam stared at the paper. Choi is finished, Seojin said. His protection is gone. And every officer, every contact, every person who has been feeding him information from inside this facility, a pause, their names are in those files too. The radio stayed in Nam's hand. But his grip had changed. 30 seconds. Seojin said quietly. Think about what you want the next 10 years of your life to look like. Silence. The dock clock ticked. At second 19, Nam lowered the radio. He turned around. He went back through the north door. It closed. Amara realized she had been holding her breath for approximately the last 45 seconds. She let it go, all of it, one long controlled exhale, and turned to look at Seojin. The files went out 40 minutes ago, she whispered. 37, he said. I rounded. You sent them before, while you were still in there. I needed Choi neutralized regardless of whether today worked. He held her gaze. Steady and direct. And I needed you safe regardless of whether I got out. She stared at him. He looked back at her with that face, that infuriating, contained, burning face, and then he said, quietly, Van. We can discuss my decision-making later. She turned. They ran the last 10 feet. The van doors closed behind them. In the dark of the moving van, 10 minutes south of Gyeongsan, Amara sat against the wall with her knees pulled up and her heart doing things that had nothing to do with the escape. Ryu drove. Didn't speak. Didn't look back. A professional silence that left the back of the van entirely to the two of them. Seojin sat across from her, still in the maintenance uniform, watching her with those dark, steady eyes. You okay? He asked. I've just helped someone escape from prison, she said. Define okay. You're not shaking. I'm shaking on the inside. That's efficient. Don't compliment my trauma responses right now, I'm using them. He almost smiled. Didn't. She was learning to read the gradient. There was the full smile, which had happened once and ruined her. There was the almost smile, which happened sometimes and was nearly as bad. And then there was this thing, this current of warmth under the surface, that showed up in his eyes first and moved outward and which he probably thought he was hiding. He was not hiding it. Nam will talk, she said. Eventually. We'll be out of the country before it matters. Busan is still 3 hours away. Ryu knows the roads. And if there are checkpoints. Amara. He leaned forward, just slightly, closing the distance across the van floor. What's the real question? She looked at him. Because you planned for checkpoints, he continued. You planned for head counts and duty rosters and camera angles. You've been planning for 2 weeks and everything you've said just now, you already had answers for. His head tilted, that chess player tension, the one she'd felt across a prison table for 18 weeks and felt more closely now in 6 inches of darkness. What are you actually asking? The van turned. Ryu navigating something, somewhere. The outside world visible only as light and shadow through the blacked-out rear windows. You said, Amara began carefully, that you sent the files regardless of whether today worked. She held his gaze. Regardless of whether you got out. Yes. You protected your men. You neutralized Choi. You did all of it whether or not you were free. She paused. Why did you need to get out at all? Something moved across his face. Real and undefended and very, very close to the surface. You know why, he said. I want to hear you say it. Silence. The van hummed. Ryu took a curve somewhere and the world tilted slightly and they both shifted with it, and the distance between them was less now, less than it had been, less than the table had ever allowed. Because I wanted. He stopped. Started again. Lower. For 19 years I have wanted nothing for myself. Everything I built, every move I made, every decision, his jaw worked, it was all for the empire. For the people who depended on it. There was no version of any of it that had space for a breath. For this. For what? She said. Her voice was barely above the van noise. For wanting something that isn't a strategy. He looked at her with the whole of it open in his face. No more chess, no more calculation, just the raw, unpracticed truth of a man who had spent his life being certain and was certain now in a way he hadn't expected and didn't know what to do with. For wanting you. The van hit a stretch of straight road and the silence went long and full and neither of them moved. Then Amara leaned forward across the van floor, closed what was left of the distance, and kissed him. It wasn't the tentative kind. She was done with tentative. Tentative was for people who had time to waste, and they had used all of theirs in 18 weeks of careful sessions and folded notes and almost smiles and black coffee and the kind of one that builds so slowly you don't notice until it's weight-bearing. She kissed him like she'd been planning it. like it was the part of the plan she hadn't written down. He went still for exactly 1 second. Surprise, genuine surprise, the first truly unguarded thing she had ever pulled from him, and then he kissed her back. Oh, this was a problem. His hand came up to her jaw, careful and certain, the same hand that had started toward her face in week 3 and pulled back, that had covered hers on the table in week 13, that had been demonstrating restraint she now understood had been costing him considerably, and now it was just there, warm and real and not going anywhere. He kissed her like a man who had been waiting and had decided, in this moving van on this road to Busan, that waiting was over. When they broke apart, Amara pressed her forehead to his and breathed. His thumb traced along her cheekbone. Back and forth. Unhurried. You're going to say something professional, he said. I'm not, actually. You're going to say this complicates things. It does complicate things. See. But it was already complicated. She pulled back enough to look at him. His face in the half-dark, the dragon tattoo, the clean lines, the eyes that had been reading her since day one. It was complicated from the moment I walked into that yard and looked at you. I looked first, he said. You did, she agreed. And you've been looking ever since. So have you. I work in welfare. I'm supposed to look. Not like that. The corner of his mouth. The unauthorized corner. Not the way you look at me. She felt warmth move up her neck. Shut up. I'm just noting. Kang Seojin, I swear. You kissed me first, he said, very calmly and completely without remorse. I'm aware. In a getaway van. It seemed like the right moment. Running from the law. It was romantic, she said. From the driver's seat, Ryu made a sound. They both looked forward. His shoulders were slightly too high. He was definitely laughing. He was doing it silently and very professionally, and he was absolutely laughing. Ryu, Seojin said flatly. Driving, Ryu said. I'm just driving. Keep doing that. Yes, sir. Amara pressed her lips together. Seojin looked at the ceiling. A beat passed between them, and then she felt it, his hand in hers, fingers lacing through, warm and unhurried, and she looked down at their joined hands and thought, this is the most absurd and real thing that has ever happened to me. For the record, she said. I don't regret any of it. He looked at her. Even the pickpocketing. I was excellent at that. You really were. He said it with what she could only describe as reluctant pride. 8 seconds. I thought it would take you 12. I'm sorry, were you timing me from your cell? I was running projections. You were timing me. I was being supportive. That is not what supportive looks like. You did it in 8 seconds, Amara. That's exceptional. Not everyone could. Oh, so now you're complimentary. I'm always. You told me I was late on day 1. You were late on day 1. By 27 minutes. Exactly. I had coffee on my shirt. Which you called your credentials. Because they are. From the front, we have a checkpoint in 4 kilometers, Ryu said, completely calm. Silence. They looked at each other. Right, Amara said. Right, he said. All the humor drained out of the van in approximately 1 second and was replaced by a focused, crackling tension that was a completely different kind of electricity. Amara reached for her bag. Pulled out the secondary documents, transfer papers, forged beautifully by a contact she had found through a contact she was not proud of finding, all legitimate looking, all technically checking out on a first-pass system scan. Ryu has the transit log. Front seat, Seojin said. Already composed. Already somewhere else in his head, running the checkpoint approach the way he ran everything. 3 moves ahead, no wasted energy. The uniform works at a distance, she said. If they open the back. They won't. He met her eyes. This route hasn't had a back-of-van search in 14 months. Ryu picked it for that reason. 14 months isn't never. No. He squeezed her hand once, brief, certain, and let go. But I'll handle anything that isn't never. She looked at him. She believed him. That was the most alarming part. After everything, after all of it, she believed him. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. The van slowed. Amara put her back against the side panel. Even breathing. Still hands. Professional face assembled from component parts. Ryu's window went down. A guard's voice. Ryu's voice. The sound of papers. A scanner bleep. Amara counted her own heartbeats. Beside her, Seojin was absolutely silent. Not the held breath kind of silence. The I have done this before kind. The kind that came from 19 years of learning to be the stillest thing in any room. She thought, I am sitting in a getaway van next to a crime lord I just kissed. My mother cannot know about this. She thought, my grandmother would have loved this. The van moved. They were through. Amara let out a breath that she felt in her entire body. Seojin's hand found hers again in the dark, without looking, without hesitation. Breathe from your stomach, he said very quietly. She almost choked. You're going to hold that over me forever, aren't you? I have no idea what you mean. The text this morning. Breathe from your stomach, Amara. You're going to. I was being helpful. You were being smug. Both can be true. She turned to look at him, this man, this impossible, ruthless, gentle, infuriating, brilliant man, and found him already looking at her, and the expression on his face was so straightforwardly, helplessly warm that she forgot what she was going to say. What? She said. Nothing. He looked forward. Looked back. He stopped. Seojin. You look different, he said. Out here. She waited. Freer, he said quietly. You look the way you sound when you laugh. Before you remember you're supposed to be professional. His thumb moved across her knuckles. I've been wondering what that looked like. Amara Osei, who had held herself together through a prison break, a checkpoint, a confrontation with a corrupt officer, and several other things that would take years of therapy to process, felt her throat go tight. You're terrible, she told him. I've been told. You pick the worst moments. I have good timing. You really. Busan in 90 minutes, Ryu announced from the front. Seas calm. Good night for crossing. 90 minutes. Amara leaned her head back against the van wall. Looked at the roof. Felt the road beneath them. Felt the distance growing between who she'd been this morning and who she was becoming. Felt the hand in hers, warm and real and not letting go. Seojin, she said to the ceiling. When we get to Busan. Yes. And when we get on that boat. Yes. And when all of this is behind us and we are somewhere with a sky that isn't Korean and Choi is in custody and your men are safe and my mother has been told a very edited version of recent events. Yes. She turned her head to look at him. I'm going to make you jollof rice. Something in his face went warm and open and young in a way she suspected not many people had ever been allowed to see. I know, he said. And you'd better eat all of it. Every grain. And compliment it properly. Extensively. Because my grandmother was right about most things, he said. And the way he said it, like he'd been carrying her words since the moment she first spoke them, made her understand that this man forgot nothing. Not one word. Not 1 second. He had been holding all of it. She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. Outside, Korea moved past at 90 kilometers an hour. The country they were leaving, the life she was shedding, the future opening in front of them like a door nobody had gotten around to locking. It was terrifying. It was the most awake she had ever felt. They reached Busan at dusk. The harbor smelled like salt and engine oil and possibility. The boat was exactly where it was supposed to be. Small, fast, running no lights yet. A man on the dock who took an envelope from Ryu without making eye contact and disappeared. Amara stood at the edge of the dock and looked at the black water and the red horizon and the open sea beyond it. She heard him come to stand beside her. Not behind. Beside. Shoulder to shoulder at the edge of the world. No more grey walls, she said. No more grey walls. No more fluorescent lights. God willing. No more room 7. A pause. She felt him look at her. I liked room 7, he said. She turned to look at him. You liked a prison consultation room. I liked what happened in it. She held his gaze. In the last light of the Korean evening, with the harbor behind him and the boat waiting and the whole impossible story of the last 18 weeks sitting between them like something they'd built without a blueprint, She held his gaze and felt the thing she'd been carefully not naming name itself, simply and completely. Love. Ordinary word. Extraordinary weight. We should board, she said. We should. Neither of them moved. Seo-jin. Yes. I need you to know something. Okay. I didn't do this for the bridge. She held his eyes. I didn't do it for obligation or gratitude or because I thought I owed you. I want to be very clear about that. He was very still. I did it because 18 weeks ago I walked into a yard and a man looked at me like I was the first unpredictable thing he'd encountered in years. She took a breath. And I've been walking toward him ever since. Kang Seo-jin looked at her. He reached up, both hands, and cupped her face the way he had stopped himself from doing 100 times across a bolted table in a room with a blinking camera. No table. No camera. No walls. He kissed her. Slow, this time. Like they had time. Like there was no checkpoint, no head count, no alarm. Like there was just the harbor and the boat and the sky going red at the edges and the two of them choosing each other in the open air. When he pulled back, he pressed his forehead to hers and held it there. For the record, he said, quiet and certain. His voice had lost every layer of management and control, and what was left was simple and real and entirely his. I have been walking toward you since week 1. I simply had further to go. She laughed, breathed, pressed her hand against his chest and felt his heartbeat, which was not as steady as his face suggested, which was the best thing she had ever discovered. Your heart is racing, she said. I'm managing it. Very poorly. I'm usually better under pressure. Kang Seo-jin, reduced to a racing pulse by a welfare officer. Reduced to everything by a welfare officer, he said, without a trace of irony, and she felt it land in her chest and stay there. Boat, she said, very softly. Boat, he agreed. He took her hand. They walked down the dock together, two people who had found each other in the worst possible place under the worst possible circumstances, who had crossed every line and broken every rule getting here, who were somewhere between fugitive and free and entirely certain about each other. They stepped onto the boat. The engine turned. Korea disappeared into the dark behind them. And in front, the open water. The next country. The next life. All of it uncertain. All of it theirs. He had burned cities for less. He had buried men for less. But the moment he heard her voice on the other end of a phone that shouldn't have rung, the moment he heard fear in it, Kang Seo-jin stopped being strategic. For the first time in 19 years, he simply became dangerous. They had been in Dakar for 11 days when everything went wrong again. Which, Amara reflected, was actually pretty good. 11 days was longer than she'd expected. 11 days of relative peace, new city, new air, salt wind off the Atlantic, the particular golden light of late afternoon on streets that smelled like fish and spices and something she could only describe as home adjacent. 11 days of almost believing they'd made it. Almost. But first, the 11 days. Because the 11 days mattered. Day 1. They arrived at 4 in the morning, off a boat that smelled like engine oil and sea salt, into a city that was waking up slowly in the way coastal cities do. Fishermen first, then vendors, then the gradual, ambulate machinery of ordinary life. Seo-jin looked at Dakar the way he looked at everything, with that precise, cataloguing attention, reading the city like a text. Amara looked at Dakar and felt something in her chest unhook. She had not been here in 3 years. She had not realized, until this moment, standing on a dock with a fugitive crime lord and a man named Ryu who had already disappeared back onto his boat like he'd never existed, how much she had missed it. You're smiling, Seo-jin said beside her. I'm home, she said simply. He looked at her. Then he looked back at the city. Something in his face, quiet and wondering, like a man encountering a concept he'd read about but never experienced. What does that feel like? She looked at him. This man who had built his empire from nothing, who had no country he could safely return to, who had never, she realized, mentioned a home. Not once. In 18 weeks of sessions. It feels like breathing for the first time in a long time, she said. He was quiet. We'll find you one, she said. A place that feels like that. He looked at her like she'd said something in a language he was only just learning. Then he said, very quietly, I already have. Amara looked at him. He looked at the city. The corner of his mouth. She grabbed her bag and walked ahead so he couldn't see her face. Come on. I know somewhere we can stay. Her cousin Kofi owned a guest house in the Plateau district, narrow building, blue shutters, a rooftop terrace where you could see the ocean on clear days, and a front desk staffed by Kofi himself, who was 6'3", built like a door, and opened that door at 4:30 in the morning to find his cousin on the step with a Korean man he'd never met, 2 bags between them, and the expression of someone who had recently made several significant life decisions. Kofi looked at Amara. He looked at Seo-jin. He looked at Amara again. "I'm not asking," he said. "Please don't," she said. "Is he dangerous?" Seo-jin said nothing. He didn't need to. He was standing in the doorway at 4 in the morning with a dragon tattoo and the energy of a man who had, very recently, dislocated someone's shoulder and called it an accident. Kofi stepped back. "3rd floor. Don't wake the other guests." He disappeared behind his desk, produced 2 keys, held them out. "Breakfast is at 7. I make thie boudin on Fridays. You look like you need thie boudin." This last part was directed at Seo-jin with the assessing eye of a man who fed people as an act of love and could tell when they hadn't been fed properly. Seo-jin looked at the key. Looked at Kofi. Something passed between them, a mutual, silent evaluation, and then Seo-jin said, "Thank you." 2 words. Simply. No armor in them. Kofi glanced at Amara with an expression that said, "Okay, I see it." She pretended not to notice. She was a professional. Day 2 through 5. The work. Seo-jin moved like a man making up for lost time, which he was, 18 months of planning compressed into 72 hours of execution, using the network of contacts he'd been cultivating through encrypted channels while sitting in a cell that the Korean prison system had apparently believed was isolating him. It had not isolated him at all. Amara tried not to think too hard about what this said about the Korean prison system. The financial records went to 2 international prosecutors and 1 journalist named Minute G who had been waiting for this story for 3 years and answered Seo-jin's first contact message at 2 in the morning in 45 seconds flat. The documentation on Director Choi's manufactured testimony went to the appeals court through a lawyer in Seoul who owed Seo-jin a debt that apparently predated the syndicate and that Seo-jin declined to explain further. Amara sat across from him at the small desk in their room and watched him work, methodical, relentless, the face he wore when he was purely operational, and thought about how strange it was that this, specifically, watching him dismantle a corrupt empire from a guest house in Dhaka with a laptop and a coffee that was definitely not black enough for his taste, was the thing that made her feel safest. "You're staring," he said without looking up. "I'm supervising." "You're staring. Those aren't mutually exclusive." He looked up. The operational face cracked, just slightly, just enough. "If you have opinions about my methodology." "Your methodology is fine. I have opinions about your coffee." He looked at the cup. Back at her. "What about it?" "You've been drinking it wrong." "I drink it black." "You drink it burnt. Kofi's coffee needs a 30-second bloom or it goes bitter." She stood, took the cup, went to the small kettle in the corner, did something with the temperature and the timing that her grandmother had taught her at age 7, and handed it back. He took a sip. He looked at the cup. He looked at her. "That is," he said, with the specific reluctance of a man who didn't like being wrong about things he'd been doing his whole life, "considerably better." "You're welcome." "I didn't say thank you." "Your face did." "My face." "Seo-jin." She sat back down, crossed her arms. "Your face has been saying things without your permission for weeks. I've been keeping a log." He stared at her. She stared back. He turned back to his laptop with the dignity of a man who was absolutely going to address this later and chose not to address it now. "The prosecutor confirms receipt," he said. "Good. Choi will be flagged for international asset seizure within 48 hours. Better. After that, the Korean charges against me become substantially harder to maintain. Best." She uncrossed her arms. "And my situation?" He was quiet for a moment. "Your employment record ends with a voluntary resignation. I had someone process it before we left." She blinked. "You, what?" "You didn't abandon your post. You resigned." He kept his eyes on the screen. "Clean. No warrant. No flag. You can't just, how did you even?" "I know the administration password for Kyungson's HR portal." He said this like it was the most ordinary sentence. "I've known it for 9 months." Amara opened her mouth. Closed it. Of course you do, she said. I was thorough. You were in a cell. I was thorough from the cell. She pressed her fingers to her temples. Is there anything about that prison you didn't know? The combination to the warden's safe, he said. I was working on it. She stared at the side of his face. He pulled up a new document. I need 40 more minutes, he said. Then I'll make dinner. She stopped. You cook. He paused. Just briefly. I didn't say I'd make it well. He made it badly. Magnificently badly. With the full, focused, uncompromising intensity of a man who approached everything as a problem to be solved, applied all of that intensity to Kofi's small kitchen, followed 3 recipes simultaneously on his phone, and produced rice that was somehow both underdone and stuck to the pan, a sauce that smelled wonderful and tasted of pure ambition, and a side dish that Amara couldn't identify but ate anyway because he looked so deeply, privately invested in whether she liked it. It's good, she said. He looked at his plate. It's not. The sauce is excellent. The rice is structural. It has texture. It has the texture of a mistake. Seo-jin. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. His eyes came up. You just dismantled a criminal empire from a guest house in Dhaka in 3 days, while cooking dinner, with a bad coffee. You cannot be good at everything. He looked at their hands. Looked at her face. I'm going to be better at this, he said. Meaning the dinner. Meaning something much larger than the dinner. I know, she said. He turned his hand over under hers. Held on. Outside, the Atlantic made its patient sound against the city, and the lights of Dhaka came on one by one, and for 11 days, it was enough. Day 11. The call came at 6:15 in the morning. Not Seo-jin's encrypted line. Not Ryu. Not the lawyer. Her phone, the new one, the one only 3 people had the number to, one of whom was Kofi downstairs and one of whom was her mother and one of whom was. Unknown number. She answered. Ms. Osei. Male voice. Korean accent. Controlled and light in the way that things are controlled and light when they're covering something harder. My name isn't important. What's important is that I know where you are. Amara went very still. Seo-jin was asleep. First real sleep she'd seen him take in 4 days, on his back on the bed behind her, face finally unguarded the way only sleep could make it. She stood up. Walked to the window. Kept her voice completely flat. Who are you? I work for Director Choi. Or, a pause, I did. Before your friend's files made that professionally complicated. Something shifted in the voice. Harder. He has one last arrangement in place. An insurance policy, he called it, before the prosecutors moved. It involves you specifically, Ms. Osei. Your cousin's guest house. Tonight. Her blood went cold. What arrangement? The kind that doesn't require Kang Seo-jin to be present. The kind that sends him a message. A pause. The kind that makes sure he has nothing left to fight for. She gripped the phone. Why are you telling me this? She said. Because I've read those files. A long silence. Choi had my name in them too. For things I did because he told me to and I want no more part of. A sound. Not quite a breath. Something more complicated. Get out of that building. Both of you. Before 9 p.m. The line went dead. Amara stood at the window for 4 seconds. Then she turned around. Seo-jin was already awake. He was sitting up in the bed, watching her, and his face, the face she had learned to read like a language, the face that told her everything under its surface, was doing something she had not seen before. Not calculation. Not control. Rage. The cold, structural kind. The kind built into the foundations of a person rather than sitting on the surface. He had heard. She didn't know how much. Enough. How many entrances does this building have? He said. His voice was completely level. The levelness of something that had gone past the point where volume mattered. Seo-jin. How many? 3. Front, service alley, and the rooftop access from the east building. He was already on his feet. Already moving. He went to the small case under the bed, the one she had not asked about because she was learning which things not to ask about, and opened it. Pack what matters, he said. 3 minutes. Seo-jin, it's 6 in the morning. We have until. We are not waiting until 9. He pulled out a phone she hadn't seen. Started dialing. Choi's people run early when they're desperate. The caller gave us a window. We move now. We can't just. Kofi is downstairs. His guests. I know. He looked up. Met her eyes. I'm handling Kofi. Pack. Something in the way he said I'm handling Kofi, not threatening, not cold, just absolute, made her understand that Kofi and his guests were about to become the safest people in Dakar. She packed. 6 minutes later, in the order they were issued, Kofi and his 4 guests were moved to his sister's house 4 streets over, told there was a gas concern, given free breakfast vouchers, and ushered out with a speed and calm that Seojin managed by saying almost nothing and radiating the kind of authority that makes people comply before they finish deciding to. Ryu arrived in a car she didn't know from a direction she hadn't tracked, because Ryu existed in a state of permanent readiness that she was starting to suspect was just his personality. 2 of Seojin's local contacts, men she had seen exactly once in 11 days, at a distance, who had the careful posture of people trained to notice everything, materialized at the front and alley entrances of the building within 12 minutes of the call. And Seojin himself stood in the middle of Kofi's small lobby with his phone to his ear, speaking in a rapid Korean she could only partially follow, and the expression on his face was the one she imagined had preceded 17 significant events in his career, the details of which she had read in a file and then carefully put down. He hung up. He looked at her. Choi sent 3 people, he said. They're 40 minutes out. She stared. You found that out in 12 minutes, yes. How? Amara. He crossed the lobby to her in 5 strides. Stopped in front of her. And this was the part that made her breath catch. Not the command center efficiency, not the contacts appearing from nowhere, not the cold strategic machinery of him clicking back into place, but this. Him stopping. Him putting all of it down for one moment to look at her directly. Are you hurt? No. Are you? I'm fine. She held his gaze. I'm fine, Seojin. Do what you need to do. He looked at her for one more second, reading her, the way he always read her, more thoroughly than she could read herself, and then he nodded. Once. Stay with Ryu, he said. Where are you? I need to be at the east end of this street in 8 minutes. He started moving. Seojin. She grabbed his arm. He stopped. She looked at him, this man, going toward a problem the way he always went toward everything, the way she imagined he had at 19, at 25, every year between then and now. Alone. Always alone with it. Don't, she said. Quietly. Don't go alone. I have contacts on both. That's not what I mean, and you know it. She held his arm. His eyes came back to her face. Come back, she said. Whatever you go do, come back. Something in his expression broke open and reassembled faster than she could catalogue it. He lifted his free hand. Touched her face, just once, just his thumb along her cheekbone, the same gesture he'd used on a boat leaving Korea, careful and certain. I'll be 12 minutes, he said. That's not what I asked. A beat. I'll come back, he said. Low and true. Thank you. He left. Ryu appeared at her elbow immediately, a cup of Kofi's coffee in each hand. He'll be fine, Ryu said. He held out a cup. She took it. You're very calm. I've worked for him for 8 years. Ryu sipped his coffee. I've never seen him not come back. He's been in prison. That was a setback, not a defeat. Ryu looked at the door Seojin had gone through. He spent 14 months in there building a plan to get out. He spent 3 of them making sure you'd be safe when he did. He glanced at her sideways. In 8 years I've never seen him do that for anyone. Amara looked at the door. She looked at her coffee. She thought about a man sitting in a cell, reading Camus, knowing her bus route, getting the kitchen to make her coffee right, holding a note for 3 days before deciding she was worth the risk of handing it over. The coffee needs a bloom, she said, more to herself than Ryu. Ryu looked at his cup. Does it? 30 seconds. Before you add anything. I'll remember that. He paused. Are you going to be okay? I'm already okay, she said. She meant it. Seojin was gone for 14 minutes and 30 seconds. She knew because she counted. She was not panicking. She was standing in a doorway with Ryu in the early dark morning, counting seconds in her head instead of panicking, which was a completely different thing. At the 14-minute mark, Ryu straightened very slightly. At 14:30, she saw him. Walking back up the street from the East End, unhurried, upright, the dragon tattoo catching the morning light. No visible damage. No drama. Just Kang Seojin returning from having dealt with something the way Kang Seojin dealt with things, thoroughly and without discussion. He stopped in front of her. She looked him over head to toe. He led her. 3, he said. Choi's people. They are detained. Local contact has them. Authorities will be involved through a channel that protects your cousin's address from appearing in any report. Detained, she repeated. Alive, he clarified. Unhurt. Mostly. Mostly, she said. There was a brief disagreement about whether they were going to cooperate. And they cooperated. She pressed her lips together. Seojin. They're fine. Define fine. They're sitting down. Quietly. Thinking about their choices. He tilted his head. One of them needs ice for his hand. That's the extent of the medical situation. Ryu, to his eternal credit, looked at the wall. One hand, she said. His right one. He was reaching for something he shouldn't have been reaching for. And you? I'm fine, he said. He said it the way she'd said it to Ryu 15 minutes ago, simply, and meaning it. And then something in his face changed. Shifted. The operational distance closed and what was underneath it was exhausted and real, and she's okay. She's standing here. She's okay written all over him. He crossed the last 2 feet between them and pulled her in. Not a romantic gesture. Not calculated. Not the careful touches she'd catalogued through weeks and chapters of them learning each other. This was just, arms around her, her face against his shoulder, his chin on top of her head. 2 people who had been very afraid in very different ways for the last 14 minutes and 30 seconds and were now, for the moment, not afraid. She put both arms around him and held on. He breathed. She felt it, the long, controlled exhale of a man putting down something very heavy. I heard the call, he said, into her hair. What he said. About making sure I had nothing left to fight for. She tightened her arms. Seojin. I have never, he stopped. Started again. Lower. In 19 years. I have never had something I was afraid to lose. I didn't know what that felt like. His arms tightened. I don't recommend it. You found me, she said. I found you. We are here. Yes. You came back. I said I would. I know. She pulled back enough to look at him, close, face to face, his eyes which were very dark and very awake and looking at her like she was the axis everything else rotated on. I know you did. He reached up and tucked a LOC behind her ear. Slow and deliberate, like he had been wanting to do it for a long time. Choi is finished, he said quietly. The prosecutors confirmed an hour ago. Warrant issued. Interpol notified. His accounts are frozen. It's over. His part is over. There are still processes. Still time. He held her gaze. But the thing that was hunting us is gone. She breathed. Let it settle. Over. After everything, the bridge, the prison, room 7, the notes, the plan, the van, the boat, the checkpoint, 14 minutes and 30 seconds of counting. Over. So what happens now? She asked. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, completely seriously, now you make me jollof rice. She burst out laughing. She couldn't help it. It came out of her big and helpless and slightly undignified. The laugh that happened when she forgot to be professional, and he watched it happen with that expression she had first seen in week 14 and which kept finding new ways to undo her. Warm and unguarded and his. You've been waiting to say that, she said. Since Busan, he admitted. You kissed me on a dock and the whole time you were thinking about the rice. I was thinking about both simultaneously. That is peak Kang Seojin. I'm a man of priorities. Your priorities are you, he said. Simple and direct and without a single layer of management on it. And then the rice. In that order. She looked at him. He looked back. And Ryu, who had the survival instincts of someone who had worked for this man for 8 years, said, I'll go check on the car, and disappeared around the corner without being asked. Seojin stepped closer. "We are going to figure this out," he said. Quietly. Not a question, a plan, in the way all his plans were, forward-facing and certain and built on foundations he'd already tested. Where we go. How we live. What it looks like. His thumb traced along her jaw. None of that is clear yet. None of it, she agreed. But you, he paused. Something moved through his face, vulnerable in a way she had spent weeks learning to see. You're not a variable in this, Amara. You're not something I calculate around. I want you to know that. His eyes moved across her face. You're the fixed point. Everything else gets arranged around you. She stared at him. She thought about the first day. The yard. His face. Nobody looks at Kang Seojin. She had looked, and she had not stopped, and this was where looking had brought her. Standing on a street in Dakar with a man who had memorized her footsteps and learned her bus route and broken 3 bones to keep her safe and was now telling her she was a fixed point. You know, she said carefully, that's either the most romantic thing anyone has said to me or the most alarming. I'm aware of the ambiguity. A fixed point. In the best possible. Like a coordinate. Amara. Like a pin in a map. I'm trying, he exhaled, to tell you something. I know. She smiled. I know what you're telling me. And? She reached up and touched the side of his face, his jaw, the precise jaw, the one she had memorized from across a bolted table, and watched his eyes close briefly, a man who had been holding himself carefully for a very long time, allowing himself to not. I love you, she said. Since approximately week 6. I've been very professional about it. His eyes opened. Week 6. The Camus conversation. You fell in love with me because of Camus. I fell in love with you because under 17 layers of terrifying crime lord there was a man who read Camus and found Nietzsche insufferable and got the kitchen to make my coffee right because I looked tired. She raised an eyebrow. The terrifying crime lord part is a bonus. Something happened in his face that she didn't have words for yet, something new, something she hadn't catalogued before, something that looked like a man arriving somewhere after a very long journey and recognizing the place. He kissed her. Not the van kiss, urgent and real and the first time. Not the dock kiss, slow and chosen and standing at the edge of Korea. This one was different again. This one was the third kind, the kind that knew where it was, that wasn't going anywhere, that had all the time in the world and intended to use it. She kissed him back with both hands in his and her whole heart in it and nothing held back, nothing professional, nothing careful. When they stopped, she was slightly breathless. He was not, infuriatingly, he was composed, except for his eyes, which were doing the thing, the helpless warm uncalculated thing, and his hands which were not letting go. Seojin, she said. Yes. Say it back. He looked at her. A beat. I have loved you, he said slowly, since you walked into a maximum security prison, covered in coffee, and told me my watch was wrong. He held her gaze. I have loved you since you didn't flinch. Since you looked at me across that yard and didn't look away. His voice was low and certain and completely undisguised. I have loved you since you sat in that chair and made a man who hadn't laughed in 2 years laugh. A breath. I have loved you the whole time, Amara. I simply didn't know what to do with it. She pressed her hand flat against his chest. His heart. Racing. She smiled. You're doing very well with it now, she said. The corner of his mouth. The corner that started it all. I'm learning, he said. Kofi came back at noon with his guests and a look at the front of his guest house that suggested someone had cleaned it very thoroughly of any evidence of anything, which was confirmed by the fact that he looked at Seojin for a long moment and said nothing except, breakfast is cold. I'll reheat it. Thank you, Seojin said. You fixed my door, Kofi said. The hinge on the service door. It stopped squeaking. It was bothering me, Seojin said. Kofi stared at him. You fixed my door hinge during. He gestured vaguely at the morning's events. All of that. There was a free 10 minutes. Kofi turned to Amara. I like him, he said, and walked into the kitchen. Amara looked at Seojin. Seojin looked at the ceiling. Don't, he said. I didn't say anything. You were going to say something. I was going to say that was very sweet. It was practical. A squeaking hinge is a security issue. It was sweet. It was sweet, Seo-jin. He pressed his mouth together. The rice, he said firmly. You promised me rice. She made it that afternoon in Kofi's kitchen, with Kofi supervising from the doorway with the critical eye of a man who had eaten jollof rice prepared by their grandmother and considered himself the standard by which all others were measured. Seo-jin sat at the kitchen table. He watched her cook. He had been watching her since day one, she knew that, had known it almost from the beginning, but this was different from room 7 and different from a van and different from a dock. This was ordinary. This was tomatoes and pepper and the smell of rice coming up from a pot, and her cousin making commentary from the door, and the afternoon light coming through the blue shutters, and Seo-jin Kang, who had run a criminal empire and survived prison and dismantled a conspiracy and navigated 3 countries in 2 weeks, sitting at a kitchen table watching her cook like it was the most important thing he had ever been present for. Stop staring, she said without turning around. I'm observing the process. You're staring. They're the same thing. They're really not. You said that to me once. In session. She turned around. He was watching her with that expression, the open, undefended one, the one that had started leaking through in week 6 and had never fully closed again. I remember everything you said, he added simply. Like it was obvious. Like 18 weeks of sessions had been stored somewhere he could access at will. Everything, she said. Everything. She turned back to the pot. That's terrifying. You keep saying that. You keep being that. And yet, she agreed. The rice was perfect. She knew before she put it on the table. She could tell by the smell, the texture, the sound of it settling in the pot, her grandmother's rice, carried forward through her hands. She put it in front of Seo-jin. He looked at it. He looked at her. He took a bite. He was quiet for a moment. Then, your grandmother was right about most things. Kofi made a sound from the doorway that suggested he had been won over completely and permanently. Amara sat down. Well, he paused. Actually searching for the word. Kang Seo-jin, who always had the word, who used them like a surgeon uses tools. It tastes like somewhere safe, he said finally. Like a place you can come back to. She looked at him across the kitchen table, in her cousin's house in Dakar, in the afternoon light. She thought about a welfare office. A prison yard. A note on folded paper. Coffee in a cup. A burning car on a bridge 2 years ago. All the careful sessions and all the things they'd said around the edges of what they meant, and then finally the things they'd said straight. She thought, I walked into that prison to find him and I found him. And then I found out he was already looking. Welcome home, she said. He looked around the kitchen, this small, ordinary kitchen with the blue light coming through the shutters and rice on the table and her cousin pretending not to be emotional in the doorway. Home, he repeated. Trying the word. Finding it fit. You can stay, she said. If you want. He looked at her. Amara. His voice. Low and warm and learning to stop managing itself. I'm not going anywhere. 3 months later. Director Choi was arrested at Seoul Incheon Airport attempting to board a flight to Singapore with 3 passports and a duffel bag. The Korean Appeals Court overturned 2 of Kang Seo-jin's convictions, citing fabricated testimony. Investigations were ongoing. Processes continued. Nothing was simple and nothing was instant. But the weight of it, the hunting, the running, the looking over their shoulders at every corner, lifted. Incrementally, and then all at once, the way things do when the thing chasing you finally runs out of ground. On the morning the news came through, Choi in custody, on every Korean news site, Seo-jin's name in the headlines as whistleblower rather than fugitive. Amara found him on the rooftop terrace of Kofi's guesthouse. Standing at the railing. Looking at the ocean. She had seen him look at things all her life, at walls, at chess positions, at her, with that calculating attention, always counting the moves. He wasn't counting now. He was just looking. She stood next to him. Shoulder to shoulder. The Atlantic wind off the water, the city below them in the morning light, Dakar alive and golden and unconcerned with either of them. How does it feel? She said. He was quiet for a moment. Strange. Strange how. Like a weight I'd been carrying for so long I forgot it was there. He turned to look at her. The morning light on his face, the dragon tattoo, The eyes that had been reading her from the first day. It's gone. Good strange or bad strange? Both. He turned back to the water. I don't know who I am without something to fight. She looked at his profile. Seo-jin, she said. Yes. I have a list. He turned. Of things worth fighting for. If you need something to do with your considerable energy. She held up a finger. Your lawyer says the full appeal takes 6 months. That needs managing. Another finger. There are 3 of your men who are out and need to not go back to what they were doing. That needs managing. Another. Kofi wants to expand the guest house and has approximately no business sense. That needs managing. Another. And I have been thinking, for some time now, about whether there's a version of what I do, what I actually do, the welfare work, the sitting with people nobody else bothers sitting with, that could exist here. Outside the system. Better than the system. She looked at him. That needs building. He looked at her fingers. Looked at her face. 4 things, he said. To start. That's not a list. That's a project portfolio. I know. You've been planning this. Since approximately week 9. Week 9, he repeated. Before the note. Before any of it. I came into that prison with reasons, she said. And then I found more of them. She lowered her hand. What do you think? Kang Seo-jin looked at her. Then he looked at the ocean. Then he looked back at her, and the expression on his face was the one she had first seen in a prison consultation room when a cup of black coffee changed hands. That unguarded, quiet, helplessly warm expression that she had been cataloguing for months and had finally given a proper name. I think, he said, that you are the best decision I've ever made. I made the decision, she pointed out. You slid a note across a table. Strategically. It said don't do it for obligation. That was the strategy. Make it impossible to say yes for the wrong reasons. He held her gaze. I wanted all of yours. She stared at him. He looked infuriatingly, perfectly calm. Kang Seo-jin, she said. You are the most manipulative. Effective, he said. Calculated. Thorough. Insufferable. You're smiling. She was smiling. She could feel it and she could not stop it and she was entirely done trying. She turned back to the ocean. He stayed beside her. Their arms touching, shoulder to shoulder, the warm Atlantic morning all around them. The rice was better yesterday, he said. It was the same recipe. Something was different. The tomatoes. Ah. A pause. I'd like to learn how to make it. She looked at him. You want to learn to make jollof rice. I told you I was going to be better at cooking. You also said you'd dismantle an empire. You did that in 3 days. Cooking is harder than dismantling empires. That is genuinely concerning. Nevertheless. He looked at her sideways. Will you teach me? She thought about it. She thought about this man, who knew her footsteps and her bus route and the temperature of her coffee and every word she'd said in 18 weeks of sessions, who had broken bones and evaded governments and crossed oceans, who found Nietzsche insufferable and Camus true and had said it tastes like somewhere safe like he'd found the right word for something he'd been missing his whole life. This man, asking her to teach him to make rice. Yes, she said. Tomorrow morning. Not today. Today, she said. I'd like to just stand here for a minute. He was quiet. Then his hand found hers at the railing, warm and unhurried, completely certain. Okay, he said. They stood. The city moved below them. The ocean moved beyond it. The world, ordinary and extraordinary and entirely indifferent to the specific weight of what people carry, turned over into another morning. 2 people stood on a rooftop in Dakar, holding on to each other, holding on to whatever came next. 6 months later. The appeal was won. The men stayed clean. The guest house expanded to 12 rooms. The welfare project opened its doors. And every Friday, in the small kitchen with the blue shutters, a man who had once terrified an entire nation stood at a stove following instructions from a woman who had walked into his cage and refused to be afraid. And made jollof rice. Still imperfectly. Every week a little better. Always eating every grain. The end. She was never just his welfare officer. She was the first person who looked at the man underneath the empire and decided he was worth the walk. He spent the rest of his life making sure she never regretted it. Purple Heart behind these bars. One story. No regrets. Fire. If this story found you, share it. The person who needs this is already on your contact list. Speech balloon. Comment below. What was your favorite moment? White down pointing backhand index. Subscribe, because the next story is already coming. And if you know this channel, you know it's going to be better. Sparkles. Thank you for watching. Sparkles from the welfare office to the rooftop in Dakar. Thank you for staying until the end.